The first bullet cracked past Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb's ear at 0347 hours, and in that fraction of a second, everything he thought he knew about the quiet female logistics officer shattered like glass. Sergeant First Class Alara Vance was already moving before the echo died, pulling a young private behind concrete barriers with a grip that spoke of training far beyond supply requisitions. The mountains surrounding forward operating base, Sentinel lit up with muzzle flashes, and Webb realized with cold certainty that they were surrounded. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone who served in Afghanistan, someone whose story never got told. Get down, Webb shouted into his radio, all personnel to covered positions. We have multiple shooters on the ridge lines. The Tactical Operations Center erupted into controlled chaos. Soldiers scrambled for cover while the crack of incoming rounds split the night air. Webb pressed himself against the reinforced wall, counting muzzle flashes, calculating angles, trying to understand how enemy snipers had gotten so close without detection. Vance crouched beside Private First Class Damon Okoye, the young soldier from Chicago who had arrived only 3 weeks ago for his first deployment. His hand was shaking so badly he could not grip his rifle properly. His breathing came in short, panic bursts that would get him killed if he tried to move. Okoye, Vance said, her voice cutting through his panic like a blade through silk. Look at me. Not at the flashes. At me. His eyes found hers in the darkness. Something in her gaze steadied him, though he could not have explained what it was. Breathe in for 4 counts, she continued. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Your body wants to panic. You are smarter than your body. She placed her hand over his on the rifle grip, adjusting his fingers with practiced precision. Her movements were economical, automatic, the kind of muscle memory that came from years of repetition in circumstances far worse than this. 20 meters away, Webb was barking orders into his radio. I need eyes on those positions. Where's my CounterSniper team? Sergeant Kowalski's voice crackled back through static. Pinned down at the north barrier, sir. We move, we die. These shooters know what they are doing. Webb cursed under his breath. 3 weeks of quiet, 3 weeks of routine patrols and supply runs, and now this. He glanced across the compound and saw Vance with a frozen private, probably telling him everything would be okay, probably making promises a supply clerk had no business making. He had never liked having her here. Logistics personnel belonged in logistics, not at forward operating bases where real soldiers did real work. But personnel shortages meant everyone pulled extra duty, and Vance had arrived with transfer orders he could not refuse. She kept to herself, did her job, never caused problems. Webb had barely noticed her until tonight. Another burst of gunfire ripped through the compound. A soldier screamed somewhere near the motor pool. Webb heard the medics calling for stretcher. Vance heard it too. Her head turned toward the sound, and Okoye saw something flicker across her face. Not fear, something colder, something calculating. Sergeant, he whispered, are we going to die? She turned back to him, and whatever he had glimpsed was gone, replaced by calm reassurance. Not tonight, Private. Not if you remember to breathe. From across the compound, Sergeant Major Tomas Resnick watched the exchange. 28 years in the Army had taught him to read soldiers like others read books. He had seen scared supply clerks before. He had seen brave ones too. But Vance was neither. The way she moved, the way she positioned herself between the private and the incoming fire without seeming to think about it. The way her eyes tracked the muzzle flashes with professional interest rather than terror. Resnick had seen that before. In operators. In people who had done things that never appeared in official records. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The silence that followed felt heavier than the gunfire. Webb waited 30 seconds, then 60, then ordered a casualty assessment. 3 wounded came to report. Specialist Holt took one in the chest. Medics say he is critical. Vance helped Okoye to his feet. You did fine, she told him. Fear is normal. It is what you do with it that matters. She pressed her canteen into his shaking hands. Drink. Stay hydrated. It helps with the shaking. He looked at her like she had just performed a miracle. Thank you, Sergeant. She nodded once and turned away before he could say more. Gratitude made her uncomfortable. It always had. She moved toward the Tactical Operations Center, staying low, using cover instinctively. Webb stood at the entrance, conferring with his officers. When he saw her approaching, his expression soured. Supply, this area is restricted to combat personnel during active engagements. Sir, Vance said quietly, I noticed something about the shooter positions. The spacing suggests coordinated fire teams, at least 4 positions covering overlapping fields. They are not random insurgents. They are trained. Webb stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that held no warmth. Thank you for that tactical assessment, Sergeant. I will be sure to add it to my report right after I note that my logistics and CO apparently thinks she is a combat analyst. Return to your position. Vance held his gaze for 1 second longer than subordination allowed. Then she nodded and withdrew. Resnick had observed the entire exchange from the shadows. He said nothing as Vance passed him. But later, when she thought she was alone behind the supply building, he saw her studying the ridgelines with an intensity that had nothing to do with counting boxes. And he saw her reach into her cargo pocket and remove something small. A photograph, worn at the edges from constant handling. She stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it away. The photograph showed 91 soldiers in formation. Every face except one had been crossed out with careful black lines. Vance looked back at the ridge lines where the enemy waited. Her lips moved, forming words Resnick could not hear. I know this pattern. I know who trained them. The wind carried her whisper away into the Afghan night, but the promise beneath the words remained. Something old was waking up, something the enemy had forgotten to fear. And somewhere on those ridgelines, someone was counting on exactly that. Dawn arrived gray and cold over forward operating base Sentinel, bringing with it the weight of what the night had cost them. Specialist Rowan Holt lay in the medical tent with a tube in his chest and machines breathing for him. The medic said he had maybe 72 hours without a proper surgical facility. The nearest one required a helicopter that could not fly through a valley controlled by enemy snipers. Lieutenant Colonel Webb stood at the head of the briefing table, his jaw set in the expression of a man who refused to admit he was outmatched. Around him sat his officers and senior NCOs, their faces carrying the exhaustion of a sleepless night and the tension of an uncertain morning. Intelligence summary, Webb said. Captain Tanaka. Captain Yuki Tanaka rose from her seat, tablet in hand. She was small and precise, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for analysis that bordered on prescient. She tapped her screen, and a map appeared on the wall display. Based on last night's engagement, we are facing a coordinated sniper network. At minimum 4 positions on the eastern and northern ridgelines, possibly more. Firing patterns suggest professional training, likely former military. They have established overlapping fields of fire that cover every approach to the FOB and every landing zone within 2 kilometers. Webb studied the map. Air support status. 36 hours minimum, Tanaka replied. Weather system moving through the region has grounded everything at Bagram. Even when it clears, any helicopter approaching this valley will be flying into a kill zone. So we wait, Webb said. Reinforce defensive positions, minimize exposure, and hold until air support can neutralize those positions. Sir, Tanaka hesitated. There's more. The attack pattern last night was unusual. They had clear shots at multiple personnel and only wounded 3. Either they are remarkably poor marksmen, which contradicts their tactical positioning, or they were not trying to kill us. They were sending a message. What kind of message? I do not know yet, but this feels personal. Targeted, like they are waiting for something. Webb dismissed the assessment with a wave of his hand. Insurgents do not send messages, Captain. They kill Americans. Our job is to make sure they fail. Dismissed. The officers filed out, but Tanaka lingered, her eyes fixed on her tablet. She had noticed something during the briefing that bothered her. The logistics sergeant, Vance, had been outside the Tactical Operations Center during the attack. Tanaka had reviewed the security footage as part of her analysis. She had watched Vance move, Supply clerks did not move like that. Across the compound, Vance sat in the supply building running inventory she had already completed twice. Her hands moved automatically through the motions while her mind calculated angles, distances, wind patterns. 4 sniper positions meant at least 8 shooters, probably more. The spacing suggested someone who understood American CounterSniper doctrine well enough to defeat it. She had seen this before. In a valley 600 kilometers from here. In a place that officially did not exist, during an operation that was never recorded. The door opened and Private Okoye entered, looking uncertain. "Sergeant Vance, I wanted to thank you again for last night. I froze in you." She cut him off with a gesture. "You did not freeze, Private. You assessed the situation. There's a difference. Next time you will assess faster. That is called experience." He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "How did you stay so calm? You acted like you had done that before." "Everyone has done that before," she replied. "First time someone shoots at you, everything slows down. You learn to think inside those slow moments. That is all." It was a lie delivered with practiced ease. Okoye accepted it because he had no framework to question it. He did not know that Alara Vance had experienced her first firefight at 23 in a jungle that officially contained no American military presence. He did not know that she had been in more engagements than he would likely see in his entire career. He did not know that the calm she displayed was not courage, but repetition, the accumulated weight of 147 moments when her finger had squeezed a trigger and a life had ended. He did not know, and she intended to keep it that way. After he left, she retrieved the photograph from her pocket. 91 faces, 90 crossed out. Michael stood in the center, his commander's insignia catching the light, his smile the one he reserved only for her. She had married him in a courthouse 3 days before deployment. Their entire marriage had lasted 4 months. She traced his face with her fingertip. Then she put the photograph away and got back to work. That evening, Captain Tanaka found her in the mess hall, sitting alone at a corner table. Most soldiers gave Vance a wide berth. She was not unfriendly, merely self-contained in a way that discouraged casual interaction. "Mind if I sit?" Tanaka asked. Vance gestured to the empty seat across from her. "Something I can help you with, Captain." Tanaka set her tray down and spent a moment arranging her utensils. "I reviewed the footage from last night. You pulled Private Okoye to cover before most people even registered the first shot." Vance continued eating. "Adrenaline does strange things. It does. But adrenaline makes people faster, not more tactical. You did not just react. You positioned yourself between him and the most likely firing angle. You knew where the shots were coming from before they came. I got lucky." Tanaka leaned forward. "I also noticed you approaching the TOC during the engagement. You told Colonel Webb the shooters were using coordinated fire teams with overlapping fields. For positions minimum." Vance set down her fork. "Is there a question in there, Captain? You're not a supply clerk. Or if you are, you are not always one." The silence stretched between them. Vance could lie. She was good at lying. But something in Tanaka's eyes suggested she already knew enough to make lies pointless. "I am exactly what my file says I am," Vance replied carefully. "If my file says something different than you expect, that is above my pay grade." Tanaka pulled out her tablet and turned it so Vance could see the screen. "Your file has gaps, Sergeant. Big ones. 3 years between duty stations with nothing but a classification code I have never seen before. And when I try to access the details, I got a message I have also never seen before." Vance looked at the screen. "File restricted. Authorization eyes only. JSOC." She looked back at Tanaka without expression. "Sounds like someone made a clerical error." Tanaka held her gaze. "Specialist Holt is going to die if we cannot get him out of here. We are pinned down by an enemy that seems to know exactly what they are doing. And I have a logistics sergeant who moves like a special operator and has a classified file connected to Joint Special Operations Command. So I will ask you directly, is there anything you can do to help us?" Vance was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, collected her tray, and looked down at Tanaka. "I am a supply clerk, Captain. I count boxes and file requisitions. That is all I am. That is all I want to be." She walked away before Tanaka could respond. But that night, alone in her quarters. She opened a footlocker at the base of her bunk and stared at what lay hidden beneath her spare uniforms. A rifle case. Non-standard. The kind that did not appear in any army inventory. She closed the footlocker without touching it, but she did not lock it. Meanwhile, in the Tactical Operations Center, Tanaka sat at her terminal running one more search. She had contacts from her time at intelligence school, people who owed her favors. One of them had just responded to her query about the classification code in Vance's file. The message was short. Stop looking. Whoever you found, they do not exist. That code is reserved for operators who died in the field. Officially, permanently dead. Tanaka stared at the message for a long time. Then she pulled up the personnel photo attached to Vance's file. A woman with dark hair and unremarkable features stared back at her. A woman who was officially dead. A woman who called herself a supply clerk. A woman whose file was connected to the most elite Special Operations Command in the United States military. Tanaka reached for a keyboard, then stopped. Some doors, once opened, could not be closed again. She opened it anyway. The second night came with a single shot that nearly took the head off a soldier walking guard duty on the northern perimeter. Private Erickson survived only because he bent down to tie his boot at the precise moment the bullet passed through the space his skull had occupied 1 second earlier. He did not sleep for the next 48 hours. Webb doubled the guard rotations and ordered all personnel to move in unpredictable patterns. The base settled into the particular tension of soldiers who knew they were being watched through crosshairs. Every shadow held a threat. Every ridgeline promised death. Vance lay in her bunk, listening to the compound breathe around her. She had not slept more than 2 hours since the first attack. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound that had defined the worst moment of her life. The crack of rifles in a valley far from here. The screams of men she loved. Michael's voice on the radio, calm even as everything fell apart, telling her to run. She had not run. She had tried to fight her way back to them. By the time she reached their position, there was no one left to save. Her eyes opened in the darkness. Sleep would not come tonight. It rarely did anymore. She dressed quietly and made her way outside, staying close to the walls, moving through shadows. The guard on duty near the supply building nodded as she passed. Sergeant Vance had a reputation for late-night walks. Nobody questioned it. She found a spot behind the motor pool where she could see the eastern ridgeline without being seen herself. The moon was a sliver, providing just enough light to make out the terrain features she had memorized from the tactical maps. 4 sniper positions, Tanaka had said. Vance had counted 5. The 5th was the one that worried her. It was positioned not for maximum coverage of the base, but for observation of a specific approach route. Someone out there was not just pinning them down. Someone was watching for something. Or someone. A footstep behind her. She did not turn, had already identified the gate. Sergeant Major Resnick settled against the wall beside her, his movements quiet despite his size. 28 years of service had taught him how to move when moving mattered. Cannot sleep either, he said. Never could on nights like this. He was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice low enough that it would not carry beyond the two of them. I served with a woman once who could shoot like nothing I had ever seen. 3-round groups at 800 meters that you could cover with a quarter. They called her Ghost. Vance said nothing. She was part of a task force that did not officially exist, Resnick continued. Joint operations, deep cover, the kind of missions that never make the news. Her unit got ambushed about 2 years back. Whole team wiped out. Intel said there were no survivors. Sounds like a tragedy. It was. 91 operators. Best of the best. Gone in one night because someone sold them out. The woman, Ghost, she was listed among the dead. Closed casket funeral. Full honors. The works. Vance finally turned to look at him. Her face was unreadable in the darkness. Why are you telling me this? Resnick met her gaze. Because that woman had a scar running from her left temple to her jaw. She got it in Kandahar in 2019, took shrapnel from an IED that killed her spotter. She always wore her hair down to cover it. Vance's hand moved involuntarily toward her face, then stopped. You have been keeping your hair pulled back since you got here, Resnick said. Regulation style. But tonight, in this light, I can see where the scar starts." The silence between them stretched until it became its own kind of conversation. "Ghost died with her unit," Vance said finally. "Whatever you think you see, you're mistaken." Maybe. Resnick pulled a cigarette from his pocket, but did not light it. Or maybe Ghost decided that dying was easier than living with what she lost. Maybe she buried herself in paperwork and supply requisitions because counting boxes does not require feeling anything. Maybe she thought she could disappear. And if she did, then I would tell her that the people on those ridgelines are not random insurgents. I would tell her that the shooting patterns match a specific doctrine, one that was developed by a woman named Qadira Massoud, former Afghan National Army sniper, defected to the other side about 3 years ago, built herself a team of counter-snipers that have killed 23 coalition soldiers in 6 months. Vance went very still. I would also tell her, Resnick continued, that Massoud was reported present at a certain ambush 2 years ago, the one that killed 91 operators. Some intelligence reports suggest she was not just present. She planned it. The words hit Vance like rounds to the chest. She had spent 2 years trying not to think about who had killed her family. She had told herself it did not matter, that knowing would not bring them back, that revenge was a poison she refused to drink. But now the name hung in the air between them, and something that had been dead inside her began to stir. "That is quite a story," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands had curled into fists at her sides. "It is." Resnick finally lit his cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his weathered face. "I made some calls before the comms went down. Pulled some strings with old friends. Your file got declassified to me about an hour ago, Sergeant First Class Vance. Or should I call you Ghost?" She did not answer. She was staring at the ridgeline where the 5th sniper position waited in the darkness. 147 confirmed kills, Resnick said. Most of any American sniper in the last 20 years. And that is just the ones they could confirm. The real number is probably higher. The real number does not matter. Those kills did not save the people who mattered. No, they did not. But there are people here who matter too. Specialist Holt has maybe 48 hours now. We have got 30 soldiers who are going to die if we cannot break this siege. And out there, the woman who killed your family is waiting. Vance closed her eyes. She could feel it happening, the thing she had spent 2 years running from. The cold calculation settling back into her bones. The part of her that had made her the deadliest sniper in American military history waking from its long sleep. "What exactly are you asking me to do, Sergeant Major?" Resnick reached into his jacket and produced a key. "Armory building," he said. "Locker 47. I had some equipment transferred here 6 months ago, just in case we ever needed capabilities we were not supposed to have. Nobody knows about it except me and now you." Vance took the key. It was warm from his pocket, small and ordinary, and it represented everything she had tried to leave behind. "I cannot promise anything," she said. "I'm not asking for promises. I am asking if Ghost has one more mission in her. Not for revenge. Not for the army. For the 30 people inside this wire who deserve to go home to their families." She thought about Michael, about the 90 faces crossed out in her photograph, about Okoye with his shaking hands and his desperate need to believe he could survive this, about Specialist Holt breathing through a machine. "Ghost died 2 years ago," she said. Then she pocketed the key and walked toward the armory. But maybe she could take a few more enemies with her before she stays dead. The armory building sat at the southwest corner of the compound, a reinforced structure that housed everything from standard rifles to equipment that required special authorization to access. Vance moved through the darkness with the key pressed against her palm, feeling its edges bite into her skin. Locker 47 was in the back corner, unremarkable among dozens of identical storage units. She inserted the key and turned it, and the lock clicked open with a sound that felt louder than it was. Inside, laid out with careful precision, was everything she had tried to forget she knew how to use. A Macmillan TC-338 rifle with a Schmidt and Bender scope. A suppressor designed for subsonic ammunition. A rangefinder, a wind meter, a ghillie hood. Ammunition boxes stacked neatly beneath the weapon. She ran her fingers along the rifle stock. The last time she had held a weapon like this, Michael had been alive. She had been someone else. Someone with a purpose beyond survival. Her hands began assembling the rifle before her mind gave permission. Muscle memory did not care about grief. It did not care about the promises she had made to herself in the months after the ambush. The vows to never again become the thing that had failed to save the people she loved. Her hands simply knew what they were supposed to do, and they did it. When the rifle was assembled, she held it up and sighted through the scope at nothing. The familiar weight settled against her shoulder like an old friend she had tried to abandon. Sergeant Vance. She turned. Captain Tanaka stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of vindication and something that might have been fear. Captain. Vance did not lower the rifle. You should not be here. Neither should you, apparently. Tanaka stepped inside, her eyes moving from the weapon to the woman holding it. That is not standard Army issue. No, it is not. Tanaka closed the door behind her. I found more information about your file, about the classification code. My contact told me to stop looking. He said whoever I found was officially dead. Your contact gave you good advice. He also told me the code is only used for operators from a specific task force, one that handled missions too sensitive for official acknowledgement. Tanaka moved closer, studying Vance with the analytical intensity that made her such an effective intelligence officer. You are not just a sniper, are you? You were one of them. The ghosts. Vance finally lowered the rifle. What do you want, Captain? I want to know if you can help us. Specialist Holt is getting worse. We have 36 hours of supplies before we start rationing. The enemy has us pinned, our communications are compromised, and our commanding officer is too proud to admit he is out of his depth. I need to know if the woman standing in front of me can change any of that. The silence stretched between them. Vance thought about all the reasons she should lie, should deflect, should maintain the fiction that had protected her for 2 years. Then she thought about Okoye's shaking hands, about Holt's labored breathing, about the soldiers who would never see their families again if she stayed buried. I was part of Joint Task Force, she said finally. Special operations, deep reconnaissance, high-value target elimination. We operated in places that did not exist, doing things that never happened. 2 years ago, my unit was ambushed. 91 operators. I was the only survivor. Tanaka absorbed this without visible reaction. And now you're hiding in a supply office. I was not hiding. I was trying to stop being what I was. What were you? Vance met her eyes. They call me Ghost. 147 confirmed kills. I was the best sniper the task force had ever produced. And I could not save a single person I loved when it mattered. Tanaka was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her jacket and produced her sidearm. She checked the chamber, verified the magazine, and held it out to Vance grip first. Back up, she said, in case you need it. Vance looked at the offered weapon. You're not afraid of what I am. I'm terrified of what you are. But I'm more terrified of what happens to these soldiers if you stay buried. Tanaka pressed the pistol into Vance's hand. So whatever you need to do, do it. I will handle Webb. Before Vance could respond, the building shook. A distant explosion echoed across the compound, followed by shouts and the sound of running boots. They reached the door in time to see flames rising from the communications tower. The dish that connected them to headquarters, to air support, to any hope of external assistance, was a twisted ruin of melted metal and sparking wires. Soldiers scrambled to contain the fire, while others scanned the ridgelines for the shooter who had delivered the explosive round. Webb emerged from the Tactical Operations Center, his face a mask of controlled fury. They are isolating us, Tanaka said. No communications means no air support coordination, even when the weather clears. It means more than that, Vance replied. She was watching the ridgelines, her mind automatically calculating angles and trajectories. They could have taken out the tower any time in the last 2 days. They waited until now. Why? Because now we are scared. Now we know we are alone. They're not just trying to kill us, Captain. They're breaking us down psychologically first, making us desperate. Tanaka turned to look at her. You have seen this before. Once. Vance's voice was flat. in a valley 600 kilometers from here. They did the same thing to my unit before the ambush. Cut communications, isolated us, let fear do half the work. By the time they hit us, half my people were already making mistakes from exhaustion and stress. Across the compound, Webb was barking orders that would accomplish nothing. More guards, more defensive positions, more of the same thinking that had already failed them. You said the woman leading them is named Kadira Massoud, Tanaka said. The one who planned the ambush on your unit. Yes. And this is not random. She is not just besieging a forward operating base. She is hunting you specifically. Vance did not respond. She was staring at the eastern ridgeline where the 5th sniper position waited. The one that was not positioned for tactical advantage. The one that was positioned for observation. For watching. The realization hit her like ice water. Massoud knew she was here. Somehow, some way, the woman who had killed her family knew that Ghost had survived, knew where she had hidden herself, and had come to finish what she started. This was never about the base, Vance said quietly. This was about me. As if an answer, something flickered in the darkness beyond the wire. A light, brief and deliberate, from the direction of the 5th position. Then another, and another. Someone was signaling. And then a soldier near the perimeter shouted and pointed. Something had been placed on the ground just outside the wire, close enough that whoever put it there had walked within meters of the base without being detected. Vance moved before anyone could stop her. She reached the object and felt her heart stop. It was a photograph. Her photograph. The one with 91 faces, 90 crossed out. But now there was something new. A message written in the margin in careful English script. Hello, Ghost. I have been waiting. Come out and play. Vance looked up at the ridgeline, where Kadira Massoud waited in the darkness. The hunter had become the hunted, and the hunt was just beginning. Vance stood at the wire holding the photograph that should have been impossible. She had kept it in her cargo pocket since the day she buried her old life. She had never shown it to anyone, never left it unattended, never let it out of her possession for more than the few minutes it took to shower. Yet here it was, in the hands of the enemy, with a message written in ink that was still fresh. Captain Tanaka reached her side, breathless from sprinting across the compound. What is it? What did they leave? Vance did not answer. She was calculating how Massoud could have obtained the photograph. The original was still in her pocket. She pulled it out and compared the two. Identical. A copy then. But copied from what? She had never photographed it, never scanned it, never allowed it to be documented in any way. Unless someone had done it without her knowledge. Someone with access to her personal effects. Someone inside the wire. The thought was a cold blade sliding between her ribs. Sergeant Vance. Tanaka's voice was sharp with concern. Talk to me. Vance handed her the photograph. The copy, not the original. Tanaka read the message and went pale. She knows you are here, Tanaka said. She has known since before the first shot. Vance turned to look at the compound, at the soldiers moving through their duties unaware of the deeper game being played around them. This entire siege is a message. An invitation. She wants me to know she has been watching. She wants me afraid. Are you? Vance considered the question. 2 years ago, the answer would have been no. Ghost did not feel fear. Ghost felt only the cold mathematics of trajectory and windage, the clinical detachment that allowed her to end lives without hesitation. But Ghost had died with her brothers. The woman who remained was something else. Something that remembered how to be afraid. Yes, she admitted. I am terrified. Tanaka studied her for a long moment. Then she folded the photograph and tucked it into her own pocket. Fear is just information, she said. It tells you what matters. What matters to you right now? The people inside this wire. Vance looked back at the ridgeline, and making sure the woman out there never hurts anyone else. They returned to the Tactical Operations Center, where Webb was conducting a damage assessment of the communications tower. The news was worse than expected. The dish was destroyed, the backup transmitter was damaged beyond field repair, and their only remaining option was a portable unit with a range of less than 5 kilometers. Not enough to reach anyone who could help. We are on our own, Webb announced to his assembled officers. Until the weather clears and air support can reach us, we hold this position and wait. Vance stood at the back of the room, invisible in her role as supply sergeant. But Resnick caught her eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. He knew what she was carrying now. He knew what she was capable of. Sir, Tanaka spoke up. I recommend we consider alternative options. Webb's expression soured. Such as, offensive action. We have personnel with the training to conduct CounterSniper operations. If we can eliminate even one or two of their positions, we open a corridor for medevac. And who exactly do you propose leads this suicide mission, Captain? Webb's voice dripped condescension. You. Perhaps one of the privates who has never seen combat outside a video game. Tanaka hesitated. She glanced at Vance, a question in her eyes. Vance shook her head slightly. Not yet. Not like this. We hold position, Webb continued. That is final. Dismissed. The officers filed out, but Vance lingered until only she and Webb remained. He noticed her presence with visible irritation. Something you need, Supply Sergeant. Permission to speak freely, sir. Webb leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. By all means, I could use the entertainment. You're going to get everyone killed. The smirk vanished. Excuse me. The enemy commander is not trying to overrun this base. She is conducting psychological warfare. She is breaking down morale, eliminating hope, and waiting for us to make mistakes. Every hour we sit here doing nothing, she gets stronger and we get weaker. Specialist Holt does not have time for us to wait. Webb rose from his chair, his face flushing with anger. You're a logistics NCO, Sergeant. You count bullets and bandages. You do not have the first clue about tactical command. I know that 4 sniper positions with overlapping fields of fire can be neutralized by a single operator with the right training and equipment. I know that the shooter in the 5th position is not there for tactical advantage, but for observation. I know that the woman commanding those positions wants something specific from this engagement, and it is not the death of random American soldiers. Webb stared at her. And how exactly does a supply clerk know all this? Vance held his gaze. Because I have seen it before, sir. Because I have done it before. The silence stretched between them. Webb's eyes narrowed as he reassessed the woman standing before him. Something in her bearing had shifted. The invisible supply sergeant was gone, replaced by someone who stood like a predator pretending to be prey. Who are you? He asked quietly. Someone who can save your people. If you let me. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. I do not know what game you are playing, Sergeant, but I am not interested. Return to your duties. That is an order. Vance did not move. Men are going to die because of your pride, Colonel. Get out, Webb snapped. Before I have you confined to quarters. She left without another word. But as she walked across the compound toward the supply building, she felt the weight of failure settling onto her shoulders. She had tried to work within the system. She had tried to convince the man in charge to see reason. Now she had no choice but to go around him. She found Resnick waiting for her outside the armory. His expression told her he already knew how the conversation had gone. Webb will not listen, she said. Webb is a fool, but he is a fool with command authority. Resnick pulled a cigarette from his pocket. What are you going to do? Vance looked up at the stars, cold and distant above the Afghan mountains. Somewhere out there, Kadir Massoud was watching. Waiting, enjoying the slow destruction of hope inside the wire. I'm going to do what I should have done 2 years ago, Vance said. I'm going to finish this. She walked into the armory and closed the door behind her. When she emerged an hour later, she was no longer Sergeant First Class Alara Vance, supply clerk. She was Ghost. And tonight, the hunter would become the hunted. Captain Tanaka had spent 6 years in military intelligence learning to find patterns in chaos. She had tracked insurgent networks through fragmentary data, predicted attacks from whispers and rumors, built profiles of enemy commanders from scraps of intercepted communications. But nothing had prepared her for what she discovered when she finally broke through the encryption on the files Resnick had obtained. The woman called Ghost was not simply a skilled sniper. She was a weapon the United States had spent 15 years perfecting. Tanaka scrolled through the declassified portions of Vance's service record, her coffee growing cold beside her keyboard. Recruitment at 19 from an Army marksmanship competition where she had outshot every male competitor by margins that should have been impossible. Selection for a program that officially did not exist. Training in places whose names were redacted, even in classified documents. Then the missions. Page after page of operations in countries the United States was not supposed to be operating in. High-value targets eliminated with single shots from distances that pushed the limits of physics. Extraction of assets from hostile territory. CounterSniper operations against enemies who thought themselves untouchable. 147 confirmed kills was the official number, but the unofficial estimates suggested the true count was closer to 200. Ghost had been the most lethal precision shooter in American military history, and she had walked away from it all to count boxes in a supply warehouse. Tanaka understood why. The ambush that had killed her unit was detailed in the final pages of the file. Task Force Spectre, 91 operators, wiped out in a coordinated attack that suggested intimate knowledge of their tactics and positions. The after-action report concluded that the unit had been betrayed by someone with access to their operational plans. Someone who had never been identified. Tanaka closed the file and sat in the darkness of her quarters, thinking about the woman who had survived that massacre. Ghost had lost everything. Her husband, her brothers, her purpose. She had buried herself in anonymity because living as herself had become unbearable. And now the architect of that massacre had come to finish what she started. Tanaka pulled up the intelligence files on Qadira Massoud, former Afghan National Army, trained by coalition forces in counter-sniper tactics. Defected 3 years ago after her family was killed in a drone strike that was later classified as a targeting error. Since then, she had built a network of precision shooters who had killed more coalition soldiers than any other insurgent element in the region. But there was something else, a detail buried in a footnote that made Tanaka's blood run cold. Massoud had not simply participated in the ambush on Task Force Spectre. According to a source whose reliability was rated as high, she had planned it. She had provided the intelligence that allowed the attackers to position themselves perfectly. She had personally killed at least 12 of the operators, including the unit commander, including Michael Vance. Tanaka found Ghost in the armory, assembling her equipment with movements that were mechanical and precise. The woman who looked up at her approach was not the quiet supply sergeant Tanaka had met 3 days ago. This woman had eyes like winter. I found the files, Tanaka said. I know who Qadira Massoud is. I know what she did to your unit. Vance's hands did not pause in their work. Then you know why I have to do this. I know why you want to. But I also found something else. Something you need to see before you go out there. Tanaka handed over her tablet. Vance read the intelligence report, her expression unchanging until she reached the section about Michael. Then something flickered behind her eyes. Something that looked like pain trying to become rage. She killed him, Vance said quietly. She personally killed my husband. According to the source, yes. But there is more. Keep reading. Vance scrolled down. The source indicated that Massoud had obtained operational details from someone inside Task Force Spectre itself. The betrayal had not come from intercepted communications or broken encryption. It had come from a traitor within the unit who had provided everything Massoud needed. The traitor's identity remained unknown, but the source claimed that Massoud had executed the traitor herself after the ambush, calling it a matter of professional honor. Someone sold us out, Vance said. Her voice was hollow. Someone in my unit gave her everything, and she killed him for it. Or her. Tanaka took back the tablet. The point is, Massoud did not just want her unit dead. She wanted something specific, and now she is here, besieging a random forward operating base, leaving photographs and messages. She is not trying to win a military victory. She's trying to draw you out. I know. Do you know why? Vance was silent for a long moment. Then she set down the rifle component she had been holding and turned to face Tanaka fully. Because I'm the one who got away, she said. I'm a loose end, the witness, the ghost who can testify to what she did. As long as I am alive, her victory is incomplete. Tanaka nodded. So walking out there alone is exactly what she wants. Yes, and you're going to do it anyway. Vance picked up the rifle component and resumed her assembly. I'm going to do it because it is the only way to save the people in this compound. Massoud will not stop until she has what she wants. If I stay hidden, she will keep tightening the noose until everyone here is dead. But if I go out there, I control the terms. I choose the battlefield. That is not a plan. That is martyrdom. No. Vance slid the bolt into place with a decisive click. Martyrs die for causes. I'm going to kill the woman who murdered my family. There's a difference. She stood and shouldered the assembled rifle, checking its balance with practiced ease. The transformation was complete now. The supply sergeant had been a disguise, a shell worn by something far more dangerous. What stood before Tanaka was a predator preparing to hunt. I'm going out at 0200, Vance continued. I will move through the eastern approach, eliminate the CounterSniper positions one by one, and draw Massoud into the open. By dawn, this siege will be over. And if you fail, then Massoud wins, and everyone here dies. But that was going to happen anyway. At least this way, there is a chance. Tanaka wanted to argue. She wanted to find another solution, a safer path, something that did not involve sending a single operator against an entrenched enemy network. But she had read the files. She knew what Ghost was capable of, and she knew that sometimes impossible odds were just odds. I will cover for you with Webb, Tanaka said finally. Buy you as much time as I can. Vance nodded. There is one more thing. Private Okoye. He has potential. If I do not come back, make sure he gets the training he deserves. You can tell him yourself when this is over. Vance almost smiled. Almost. Maybe. But just in case. She moved toward the door, then paused. Captain, thank you for believing me. I did not believe you, Tanaka replied. I believe the evidence. The evidence says you are the most dangerous woman on this mountain. Go prove it. Vance stepped into the darkness without looking back. In 6 hours, the sun would rise on a valley transformed by blood. The only question was whose. The wire parted silently under Vance's cutters at 0147 hours, 13 minutes ahead of schedule. She had always preferred to move early. Predictability was death in her line of work, and even self-imposed deadlines could become patterns an enemy might exploit. She slipped through the gap and into the darkness beyond, her ghillie hood breaking up the outline of her head and shoulders. The rifle was a familiar weight across her back. The pistol Tanaka had given her secured at her hip. She carried enough ammunition for a prolonged engagement, but hoped she would not need it. Clean shots, quick movement, no traces. That was how Ghost operated. The eastern approach offered the best concealment, a shallow ravine that wound through the terrain toward the first sniper position she had identified. She moved through it like water, her footfalls silent on the loose stones, her breathing controlled and even. She had traveled perhaps 200 meters when she heard the sound behind her. Soft, careful, but unmistakable to ears trained to detect the slightest anomaly in the ambient noise of a combat zone. Someone was following her. Vance melted into the shadows of a rock outcropping and waited. Her hand found the grip of her pistol, but she did not draw. A gunshot would announce her position to every enemy on the mountain. The footsteps grew closer. Then a whispered voice, tight with fear but determined. Sergeant Vance, I know you are there. Please do not shoot me. Okoye. She grabbed him as he passed her position, pulling him into the shadows with a grip that made him gasp. Her face was inches from his, her eyes blazing with controlled fury. What are you doing here? She breathed. Coming with you. He swallowed hard, but did not look away. You need a spotter. I need you back inside the wire where you will not get killed. With respect, Sergeant, you're going up against at least 8 shooters in fortified positions. Even you cannot watch every angle while lining up shots. You need someone to cover your blind spots. Vance wanted to argue. She wanted to send him back, to protect him from what was coming, to keep at least one young soldier from dying because of her. But she could see the resolve in his eyes, the same stubborn determination she had seen in the youngest members of her old unit. The ones who had died trying to save others. If you come with me, she said quietly, you follow my orders without question. You move when I say move, stop when I say stop, and if I tell you to run, you run. No heroics. No arguments. Understood. Understood. She released him and studied his equipment. He had brought his rifle, his sidearm, a basic load of ammunition. Not optimal, but serviceable. Have you ever spotted for a sniper before? No? Sergeant. Then listen carefully. Your job is to watch what I cannot see. You track movement, measure wind, call out distances. You do not engage unless I tell you to, or unless we are compromised and fighting is our only option. Your eyes are more valuable than your trigger finger tonight. Okoye nodded, his fear visibly transforming into focus. She recognized the shift. It was the moment when a soldier stopped being afraid of death and started being afraid of failure. Stay close, she said, and stay quiet. They moved together through the ravine, two shadows among many. Vance set a pace that tested Okoye's endurance without breaking him, pausing at intervals to listen and observe. The first sniper position was perhaps 500 meters ahead, nestled in a cluster of rocks that provided excellent fields of fire toward the FOB. As they climbed, Okoye whispered a question that had clearly been building since he followed her through the wire. The photograph, the one they left at the perimeter. Who were those people? Vance did not answer immediately. The question touched wounds she had spent 2 years trying to ignore. But something about the darkness, the intimacy of shared danger, loosened the locks she kept on her memories. My unit, she said finally. Task Force Spectre, 91 operators. The best soldiers I ever served with. What happened to them? They were betrayed. Ambushed in a valley not so different from this one. Someone gave the enemy everything they needed to know. Positions, routes, timing. We never had a chance. Okoye was silent for a moment. The man in the center of the photograph. The one whose face was not crossed out. Who was he? Vance's throat tightened. My husband. Michael. He was our commander. I am sorry. So am I. They continued climbing. The rocks grew steeper, the footing more treacherous. Vance moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years navigating terrain like this in darkness, and Okoye did his best to match her. After 20 minutes, she held up a fist. Stop. They were close now. She could smell cigarette smoke drifting down from above, the careless habit of a shooter who did not expect company. She unslung her rifle and began assembling the suppressor with movements, so practiced they required no conscious thought. 2 targets, she breathed. 30 meters. I will take the one on the left first. The moment he drops, I take the one on the right. You watch our 6. Okoye positioned himself facing back the way they had come, his rifle ready. His hands were trembling slightly, but his breathing was controlled. He was remembering what she had taught him. Vance settled into her shooting position, letting her body find its natural alignment with the weapon. The scope brought the first target into sharp relief. A man in his 30s, bearded, AK-47 resting across his lap. He was looking at his phone, the screen's glow illuminating his face. She felt the old coldness settle over her, the detachment that allowed her to see a human being as nothing more than a problem to be solved. She had hated this feeling once, had feared what it said about her. Now, she simply accepted it. The trigger broke cleanly. The suppressed shot was a whisper in the night. The target slumped without a sound. She shifted. The second man was already turning, confusion on his face. He never completed the movement. 2 down. Clear, Okoye whispered. No movement behind us. Vance allowed herself one breath of relief. Then she was moving again, already calculating the approach to the second position. The night had only begun. 6 more shooters waited in the darkness, and beyond them, a woman who had murdered everyone Vance had ever loved. But for the first time in 2 years, Ghost was not running. She was hunting. The second position fell as quietly as the first. 2 more shooters who never saw death coming, their bodies cooling in the mountain air before their comrades knew anything was wrong. Vance moved through the darkness like a rumor, and Okoye followed in her wake, learning more about the art of silent killing in one night than years of training could have taught him. But the third position was different. They were approaching from the south when Vance felt the wrongness before she could identify its source. She raised her fist, and Okoye froze instantly, his training overriding his instincts. They waited in absolute stillness for 30 seconds. A minute. 2. Then Vance saw it. A glint of glass on the ridgeline above them. Not from the position they were approaching, but from a secondary location she had not identified from the FOB. Someone was watching the watchers. CounterSniper, she breathed. They have Overwatch on their own positions. Okoye's eyes widened. They knew he would come. They knew I would come. Vance studied the terrain with new eyes, recalculating every assumption she had made. This is not a defensive formation. It is a trap. The realization settled into her bones with cold certainty. Massoud had not positioned her people to besiege the FOB. She had positioned them to create a killing ground for anyone who tried to break the siege. Every approach Vance had identified as viable was likely covered by shooters she could not see. What do we do? Okoye asked. Vance considered their options. Retreat meant leaving the FOB to its slow strangulation. Advance meant walking into an ambush designed specifically for her. Neither choice offered good odds, but Ghost had never played the odds. She had always made her own. Change of plan, she said. We are not going to the third position. We're going to the Overwatch. That is suicide. We would have to cross open ground. Not if we go through the old village. Okoye stared at her. The abandoned settlement of Coast Fereng sat 2 kilometers to the east, a collection of crumbling mud brick buildings that had been empty since the war began. It was not on any tactical map as a viable route, because the terrain between here and there was considered too exposed. But Vance had studied that terrain from the supply building every night for 3 weeks. She had traced paths through it in her mind, calculated dead zones and blind spots, found the invisible roads that only existed if you knew where to look. Follow me, she said, and do exactly as I say. They moved east, abandoning their original approach. The ground here was rougher, strewn with boulders that provided intermittent cover. Vance navigated by memory and instinct, finding the gaps between sight lines that allowed them to pass unseen. It took an hour to reach the outskirts of Coast Fereng. The village was a skeleton of its former self. Buildings collapsed into rubble, streets choked with debris. But it offered something invaluable: concealment. They slipped into the ruins like ghosts entering a graveyard. Vance paused to orient herself, then pointed toward a partially intact structure on the village's northern edge. That building has a clear line to the Overwatch position, she said. 800 meters. Difficult shot, but manageable. And after you take it, Okoye said, the others will know exactly where we are. Yes, which is why you're going to create a diversion. She explained the plan quickly. Okoye would move to the eastern edge of the village and fire 3 shots into the air, then immediately relocate to a secondary position. The shots would draw attention away from Vance's location, giving her time to eliminate the Overwatch and reposition before the enemy could respond. It was risky. It required precise timing and a level of trust that combat forged faster than anything else. You can do this, Vance told him. Remember your breathing. Remember to move the moment you fire. Do not give them a stationary target. Okoye nodded. His fear had transformed into something harder, something that looked almost like resolve. Sergeant, if this does not work, it will work. But if it does not, he met her eyes. It has been an honor. She felt something crack in the armor she had built around her heart. This boy, this nervous private who had frozen during his first firefight, was prepared to die for a mission he barely understood, for a woman he had known for 3 weeks. The honor is mine, Private Okoye. Now move. He disappeared into the darkness. Vance climbed to her position in the ruined building, settling into a gap in the crumbling wall that gave her a clear view of the Overwatch position. Through her scope, she could see the shooter. A woman, she realized with mild surprise. Young, focused professional. One of Massoud's protégés, trained by the same doctrine that had killed 91 Americans. Vance controlled her breathing and waited. The night stretched. Minutes passed like hours. Then, from the east, 3 sharp cracks split the silence. Okoye, the Overwatch shooter, reacted instantly, swinging her rifle toward the sound. For a fraction of a second, she was looking away from Vance's position. It was enough. The shot traveled 800 meters in just over a second. The woman never knew what killed her. Vance was already moving when the echo died, scrambling down from her position and sprinting toward the rendezvous point. She heard shouting in the distance, voices calling in Pashto, the sounds of a hornet's nest disturbed. She found Okoye at the secondary position, breathing hard but alive. His eyes were wild with adrenaline. "I did it," he gasped. "I actually did it." "You did. Now we move." They know something is wrong, but they do not know what yet. We have maybe 10 minutes before they reorganize. They pushed north, leaving the village behind. The overwatch was down, which meant the remaining positions were vulnerable. But Vance knew the real challenge still waited. Somewhere on this mountain, Khadira Massoud was watching. She had felt her traps spring on empty air. She knew Ghost was coming, and she would be ready. The sky to the east was beginning to lighten. Dawn was perhaps 2 hours away. Vance pushed harder, faster, knowing that daylight would strip away every advantage she possessed. Okoye kept pace beside her, transformed by the night's work into something more than he had been. He was no longer the frightened private who had frozen at the first sound of gunfire. He was a soldier who had faced his fear and found something stronger underneath. Vance recognized what that felt like. She had felt it herself a lifetime ago, before loss had taught her that courage was not enough to save the people you loved. But maybe it was enough to avenge them. They reached the ridgeline as false dawn painted the mountains gray. Below them, the remaining sniper positions waited. Beyond them, hidden in the shadows, a woman who had murdered 91 souls watched the sunrise with a killer's patience. The hunt was entering its final phase, and only one hunter would walk away. The fourth position died at 0438 hours. The fifth at 0451. Vance moved through the remaining sniper nests like death itself, each shot a whispered promise fulfilled. Okoye spotted for her now with growing confidence, his eyes finding targets before she asked, his distance calls accurate to within 10 meters. They were good together, better than she had expected. The private had a natural instinct for the work that reminded her of soldiers she had trained years ago, before everything fell apart. 6 down, 2 remaining, plus Massoud herself, still hidden somewhere in the darkness. Vance paused on a rocky outcropping to assess the tactical situation. Dawn was perhaps 40 minutes away. The FOB was visible in the valley below, its lights a cluster of warmth against the cold mountain terrain. Specialist Holt was down there, fighting for every breath. Tanaka was covering for her absence. Resnick was waiting. They were counting on her to end this. The 7th position was the most fortified, a natural cave formation that provided protection from multiple angles. 2 shooters inside, well-armed, with clear sight lines to the FOB's main gate. Taking them would require getting close. Too close for comfort. "Wait here," Vance told Okoye. "Cover my approach. If anything moves that is not me, you put it down." "Sergeant, I should come with you." "Not this time." She checked her pistol, confirming a round in the chamber. "If I am not back in 15 minutes, you get back to the FOB and tell Tanaka what happened. She will know what to do." Okoye looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her eyes stopped him. "Yes, Sergeant." Vance moved down the slope toward the cave, her rifle slung across her back, her pistol in hand. This would be close work, the kind of fighting she had hoped to avoid. She was 50 meters from the cave mouth when a radio on her hip crackled to life. She froze. The radio was set to receive only, tuned to a frequency that should have been secure. No one should have been able to reach her on it. "Hello, Ghost." The voice was female, accented but clear, calm with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. "Khadira Massoud, I have been watching you work tonight," the voice continued. "Impressive. 6 of my people dead, and you have barely broken a sweat. You are everything they said you were." Vance pressed herself against a boulder, scanning for the source of the transmission. "Massoud could be anywhere. Everywhere. I know you can hear me," Massoud said. "I also know you will not respond. That is fine. I will do the talking. You have questions. I have answers. I think we should meet." Vance's finger tightened on her pistol grip. "The cave you are approaching," Massoud continued. "My people have been instructed to stand down. You can walk in freely. They will not fire. I give you my word. The word of the woman who murdered my family. A pause. Then, softer. Yes, the word of that woman. I know it means nothing to you, but I'm offering it anyway. There are things you deserve to know before one of us dies tonight. Vance weighed her options. It was almost certainly a trap. Massoud had no reason to offer a fair meeting when she could simply wait for dawn and hunt Vance down in the daylight. But there was something in the woman's voice, something that sounded almost like respect. And Vance did have questions, questions that had haunted her for 2 years. She keyed the radio. 1 hour. Alone. If I see anyone else, I start shooting, and I do not stop until everyone on this mountain is dead. Agreed, Massoud replied. 1 hour. The cave. Just us. The radio went silent. Vance made her way back to Okoye and explained the situation. His reaction was immediate. You cannot go alone. She will kill you. Maybe. Vance checked her weapons one final time. But she wants something from this meeting. Something more than just my death. Until I know what that is, I have leverage. What could she possibly want? The truth. Vance looked toward the cave where Massoud waited. She planned the ambush that killed my unit. She murdered my husband. She has spent 2 years building toward this moment. That is not just revenge. That is obsession. An obsession always has a reason. She left Okoye with instructions to return to the FOB if she did not emerge from the cave within an hour. He protested, but she silenced him with a look. This is my fight, Private. It always has been. Whatever happens in that cave, you get back to the FOB and you help those soldiers get home. That is an order. He nodded reluctantly. She could see the fear in his eyes, but also the trust. He believed in her. Despite everything, he believed she could win. She hoped he was right. The cave mouth yawned before her, dark and silent. She approached with her pistol raised, every sense alert for the trap she expected. But the 2 shooters inside simply watched her pass, their weapons lowered, their eyes following her with something that might have been awe. Ghost. One of them whispered the word like a prayer. Or a curse. She moved deeper into the cave, following the faint glow of a lantern. The passage opened into a wider chamber, and there, sitting cross-legged on a rough blanket, was the woman who had destroyed her world. Kadira Massoud was younger than Vance had expected. Early 30s, perhaps, with sharp features and eyes that held an intelligence as cold as mountain snow. A rifle lay across her lap, but her hands rested at her sides. Non-threatening. Patient. Ghost, she said. I'm honored. Please. Seat. Vance remained standing, her pistol aimed at Massoud's chest. You have 5 minutes to tell me what I deserve to know. Then one of us dies. Massoud smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. You want to know about the ambush. About your unit. About your husband. I want to know who betrayed us. Massoud's smile faded. Her eyes grew distant, as if seeing something far beyond the cave walls. His name was Sergeant First Class David Renner, your unit's communications specialist. He came to us 6 months before the ambush, offering information in exchange for money. We verified his intelligence, found it accurate, and accepted his offer. Vance felt the name hit her like a physical blow. Renner. She remembered him. Quiet, competent, always reliable. Michael had trusted him completely. Why, she whispered. Gambling debts. Massoud shrugged. The most mundane of reasons. He owed money to people who would have killed his family. We offered him a way out. He took it, and you killed him. After the ambush. Yes, he had served his purpose, and I do not tolerate traitors. Even useful ones. Vance's hand trembled on the pistol grip. 2 years of wondering, and the answer was so ordinary, so pathetically human. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth before we finish this. Massoud rose slowly, her rifle still resting across her folded arms. And because I want you to understand something. Your husband discovered Renner's betrayal moments before the ambush began. He tried to warn the unit, tried to change the plan. That is why I killed him first. He was the only one who might have saved them. Vance felt tears burning in her eyes. Michael had known. In those final moments, he had known, and he had tried to save them all. He died protecting his people. Massoud continued. He died like a warrior. I wanted you to know that. And now you want to kill me too. Massoud shook her head. No, Ghost. Now I want to see which of us is better. She lifted her rifle in a single fluid motion. Vance was already moving. The cave exploded into violence. Vance dove left as Massoud's rifle cracked, the round passing close enough to tear fabric from her sleeve. She fired twice from the ground, forcing Massoud to roll behind a rocky outcropping. The lantern shattered, plunging them into near-total darkness, broken only by muzzle flashes. They fought by sound and instinct, two predators who had spent their lives mastering the art of killing. Vance scrambled to new cover as Massoud's rounds chewed stone where she had been. She returned fire, heard a grunt of pain, knew she had scored at least a graze. You are fast, Massoud called from the darkness. Faster than I expected. Vance did not waste breath on words. She was moving again, circling toward the cave mouth, trying to gain the advantage of backlight from the approaching dawn. Her shoulder burned where she had scraped it diving for cover, but the pain was distant, irrelevant. Massoud anticipated her movement. A round sparked off the rock inches from Vance's face, driving her back into the shadows. They were too evenly matched for direct engagement. Every advantage one gained, the other countered. The cave became a deadly game of chess played in darkness. Vance fired to suppress, moved to reposition, listened for the whisper of cloth against stone that would betray her enemy's location. Massoud did the same, her movements economical and precise. Minutes passed like hours. Vance's ammunition was running low. She had perhaps 6 rounds left in her pistol, no time to unsling her rifle in such close quarters. Then Massoud made a mistake. A small sound, a foot dislodging a pebble, coming from the wrong direction. Vance realized what had happened an instant before Massoud emerged from behind her, rifle raised for a killing shot. But an instant was enough. Vance spun and fired in a single motion, her round taking Massoud in the shoulder. The rifle flew from the woman's hands. Massoud stumbled, caught herself against the cave wall, and found Vance's pistol pressed against her forehead. They stood frozen in the gray light filtering through the cave mouth. Dawn had arrived while they fought, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold. Do it, Massoud said. Her voice was steady despite the blood flowing down her arm. Finish it. Vance's finger rested on the trigger. 1 pound of pressure separated this woman from death. One small movement would avenge Michael, avenge her 90 brothers, close the wound that had been bleeding for 2 years. She looked into Massoud's eyes and saw something she had not expected. Acceptance, even relief. You won't die, Vance said. I have been ready to die since the day your drones killed my children. Massoud's voice cracked for the first time. 3 daughters. The youngest was 4. They said it was a targeting error. They said they were sorry. Then they gave me a number to call for compensation. Vance felt something shift in her chest. She had read about the drone strike in Massoud's file, had processed it as tactical information. She had not thought about what it meant, what it had cost. That does not justify what you did. No, it is not. Massoud met her gaze without flinching. Nothing justifies what either of us has done. We are both killers, Ghost. We have both left widows and orphans in our wake. The only difference between us is the flag we serve. Vance's hand trembled. The pistol felt impossibly heavy. Your husband found the traitor, Massoud continued. He was trying to save his people when I killed him. He was a good man, better than either of us. Do not speak about him. I speak the truth. That is all I have left to offer. Massoud closed her eyes. Your husband died with honor. My children died in their beds, burned alive by a missile fired from a machine flown by someone who never saw their faces. We have both lost everything that mattered. We are both ghosts now. Vance stood at the crossroads of everything she had been and everything she might become. She could pull the trigger. She had earned that right. No one would blame her. No one would question it. But Michael would have questioned it. Michael, who had spent his career trying to build something better than endless cycles of revenge. Michael, who had believed that strength meant choosing mercy when destruction was easier. Michael, who had loved her not for what she could destroy, but for what she could create. She lowered the pistol. Massoud's eyes opened. Confusion flickered across her face. I'm not going to kill you, Vance said. Not because you deserve mercy. You do not. But because killing you would not bring him back. It would just make me more like you. She stepped back, keeping the pistol trained on Massoud's center mass, but no longer at execution range. You will stand trial, Vance continued. You will answer for what you did, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing that when I had the chance to become a monster, I chose not to. That is worse than death for someone like you. Massoud stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she laughed. A broken sound, hollow with something that might have been admiration. You are stronger than I thought, Ghost. Stronger than me. Vance pulled the radio from her belt and keyed it to the FOB frequency. This is Sergeant First Class Vance. The ridgelines are clear. I have the enemy commander in custody. Send a team to my position for extraction. The radio crackled. Then Tanaka's voice, thick with relief. Understood, Sergeant. Team is on the way. And Vance. Specialist Holt is stable. Medevac is inbound now that the corridors are clear. Vance closed her eyes. Holt would live. The soldiers would go home. Something she had done had finally saved someone. Copy that, Captain. Vance out. She looked at Massoud, who sat slumped against the cave wall, blood seeping through the fingers pressed to her wounded shoulder. It is over, Vance said. For you, perhaps. Massoud's eyes were distant now, seeing something far beyond the cave walls. For me, end of the day, my daughters stopped breathing. Everything since then has just been waiting. The sound of boots on stone echoed from outside. Okoye's voice calling her name. Relief and fear tangled together. Vance walked toward the light. Behind her, in the shadows, the woman who had murdered her family wept silently for children who would never grow old. The war was over. The ghosts remained. The sun was fully above the horizon when Vance emerged from the cave with Massoud secure behind her. Okoye was the first to reach them, his young face a mixture of exhaustion and overwhelming relief. He looked at the wounded woman, then at Vance, and something in his expression said he understood the choice she had made. Behind him came a team of soldiers from the FOB, weapons raised, moving with the cautious efficiency of men who had spent the night expecting to die. When they saw Massoud in restraints, when they understood what had happened on the mountain, the caution gave way to something else. They looked at Vance the way soldiers look at legends. She ignored their stares and focused on the descent. Her body was beginning to register the toll of the night. The scrape on her shoulder had stiffened. Her muscles ached from hours of tension and exertion. The emotional weight of everything she had learned pressed down on her like a physical burden. Renner, David Renner. The name echoed in her mind with every step. A man she had trusted, a man Michael had trusted, had sold them all for gambling debts. 91 lives traded for money to cover bad bets. She would have to tell someone. The families deserved to know. But not today. Today, she just needed to get off this mountain. The FOB gates opened as they approached. Soldiers lined the path, watching in silence as the small procession made its way inside. Word had spread. Everyone knew that the supply sergeant had walked into the darkness and broken the siege that should have killed them all. Lieutenant Colonel Webb stood at the center of the compound, his uniform crisp despite the sleepless night, his expression unreadable. Vance approached him with Massoud in tow, stopping at the regulation distance for addressing a superior officer. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Webb raised his hand to his brow in a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. Sergeant First Class Vance, he said, his voice carried across the silent compound. On behalf of everyone at this base, I owe you an apology. And my thanks. Vance returned the salute. She could have said many things. She could have reminded him of every dismissive comment, every smirking insult, every moment he had treated her as less than what she was. But there was no victory in humiliating a man who had already humiliated himself. Just doing my job, sir. Webb lowered his salute. His eyes held something that looked almost like shame. No, you did far more than that. And I was too blind to see what was standing right in front of me. That ends today. He turned to address the assembled soldiers. This woman is the reason you are all still alive. Remember that. Learn from it. I certainly have. The soldiers did not cheer. This was not a moment for celebration. But Vance saw the respect in their eyes, the acknowledgement of what she had done. And for the first time in 2 years, she did not feel like a ghost. She felt seen. Tanaka found her an hour later in the medical tent, having her shoulder wound cleaned and bandaged. The intelligence officer looked as exhausted as Vance felt, but there was a lightness in her bearing that had not been there before. Holt is going to make it, Tanaka said. Medevac got him out 20 minutes ago. The surgeons say he will need months of recovery, but he will live. Good. Vance winced as the medic applied antiseptic. That is good. Tanaka sat down on the adjacent cot. I spoke with Massoud during her initial processing. She confirmed everything she told you in the cave. The traitor, your husband's final moments, all of it. I have already flagged it for investigation. The families will be notified. Thank you. There's something else. Tanaka hesitated. She asked to speak with you again, before they transport her to the detention facility. Vance considered the request. She had no obligation to grant it. She owed Massoud nothing but the justice that awaited her. But something in her needed to hear what the woman had to say. She found Massoud in a secured room near the Tactical Operations Center, hands bound, shoulder bandaged, eyes staring at nothing. The guard stepped outside at Vance's request, leaving the two women alone. You came, Massoud said. I was not certain you would. Neither was I. Vance remained standing, keeping distance between them. You wanted to speak. Speak. Massoud was quiet for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than it had been in the cave. I have killed many people, she said. Americans, Afghans, anyone who stood in my path. I told myself it was justice. Revenge for my daughters. But sitting here now, watching the sun rise on a day I did not expect to see, I understand something I did not before. And what is that? Revenge is not justice. It is just more death. More children who will never come home. More wives who will weep in the night. More ghosts like us, wandering through lives that no longer have meaning. Vance said nothing. She had learned the same lesson in the cave, in the moment when she chose not to pull the trigger. Your husband understood that, Massoud continued. I could see it in his eyes when I killed him. He was not afraid. He was not angry. He was sad. Sad for me, for what I had become. I hated him for that. I have hated him for 2 years because he looked at me with pity instead of fear. He was like that. Vance's voice caught. He always saw the human being behind the enemy. Massoud nodded slowly. He would be proud of you for what you did in the cave, for choosing to be better than me. The words hit Vance harder than any bullet could have. She felt tears burning in her eyes, the grief she had suppressed for 2 years finally demanding release. I miss him, she whispered. Every day. I miss him so much it feels like drowning. I know. Massoud's eyes glistened. I miss my daughters the same way. That is our punishment, Ghost. Not death. Not prison. Just the missing. The endless, impossible missing. They sat in silence as the morning light strengthened outside. Two women who had lost everything. Two killers who had finally stopped killing. Two ghosts who might, someday, learn to be human again. When Vance finally left, she did not look back. But she carried something with her that she had not possessed in 2 years. The beginning of peace. 6 months later, the sun rose over Arlington National Cemetery with the quiet reverence that place always commanded. Vance stood in her dress uniform at the edge of Section 60, where the fallen from recent wars rested beneath rows of white stones that stretched toward the horizon like an army frozen in formation. She had come alone. This was not a day for company. The ceremony dedicating the new memorial for Task Force Spectre had concluded an hour ago. Generals had spoken. Politicians had offered words carefully crafted to honor sacrifice without acknowledging failure. The families had wept, finally given official recognition of loved ones whose deaths had been classified for 2 years. Now the crowds had dispersed, and Vance could do what she had come to do. She walked among the headstones until she found the one she sought. White marble, freshly cleaned, bearing a name that still made her heart stutter. Major Michael James Vance, beloved husband, honored soldier, faithful servant of his country. She knelt on the grass and placed her hand against the cool stone. I found out what happened, she said softly. The words came easier than she had expected. Renner betrayed us. You discovered it just before the attack. You tried to warn everyone. The morning breeze stirred the trees overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle played taps for another burial. I met the woman who killed you. Vance continued. Kadira Massoud. She told me you looked at her with pity instead of fear. That sounds like you. Always seeing the wounded soul behind the enemy. She paused, gathering herself for the harder words. I had the chance to kill her. I had the pistol against her head and every right to pull the trigger. But I kept hearing your voice in my mind. Kept remembering what you always said about breaking cycles instead of continuing them. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. So I let her live. She will stand trial. She will answer for what she did. But I did not become what she is. I did not let her turn me into another ghost haunting these hills. She reached into her pocket and withdrew the photograph. 91 faces, 90 crossed out. She had carried it for 2 years as a reminder of failure. A catalog of everyone she could not save. Now she saw it differently. These were not marks of failure. They were marks of love. Each crossed face was someone who had mattered. Someone whose life had meaning. Someone whose memory deserved more than her guilt. She placed the photograph against the headstone. I'm letting them go, Michael. Not forgetting them. Never that. But letting go of the weight. The shame. The endless wondering if I could have done something different. She traced his name with her fingertip. You would tell me that surviving was not a sin. That living is how we honor the dead. It took me 2 years to believe that. But I believe it now. She rose and stepped back, looking at the headstone in the golden morning light. I got a new assignment, she said. Training snipers at Fort Benning. Teaching the next generation what we learned. What you taught me. A smile touched her lips for the first time. There's a young soldier named Damon Okoye starting the program next month. I recommended him personally. He has potential, Michael. The kind of potential you always saw in people before they saw it in themselves. I'm going to make sure he reaches it. She straightened her uniform and offered a final salute to the man she had loved. I will come back, she promised. Every year, every anniversary, I will tell you about the soldiers I am training, the lives we are saving, the cycles we are breaking. And someday, when my time comes, I will find you again. She held the salute for a long moment. Then she lowered her hand and walked away through the rows of white stones, leaving her ghost to rest in the morning sun. 3 weeks later, Corporal Damon Okoye arrived at Fort Benning for the Advanced Sniper Training Program. He was nervous, though he hid it well. The other candidates were experienced, confident, certain of their place in the world. Okoye was just a private who had gotten lucky on a mountain in Afghanistan. At least, that was what he told himself. The training sergeant who met his class was a woman with dark hair, pulled back tight, and a faint scar running from her left temple to her jaw. She stood before them with the stillness of someone who had learned to be comfortable in silence. Welcome to the program, she said. Some of you think you know what it means to be a sniper. You think it is about marksmanship, about patience, about killing from a distance. She walked among them, her eyes assessing each candidate in turn. You are wrong. Being a sniper is about protecting the people who cannot protect themselves. It is about making impossible choices in impossible moments. It is about carrying weight that no one else can see and still finding the strength to stand. She stopped in front of Okoye. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Memory. Pride. I am Sergeant First Class Alara Vance, she said. Some of you may have heard stories about me. Forget them. The only thing that matters here is what you become, not what I was. She turned back to address the full group. Over the next 12 weeks, I'm going to break you down and build you back up. I'm going to teach you things that will save lives, including your own. And when you graduate, you will carry something with you that no amount of training can provide. She paused, her gaze distant for just a moment. You will carry the memory of everyone who came before you. The soldiers who fought and fell so you could stand here today. That is your true burden. That is your true honor. The candidates stood at attention, feeling the weight of her words settle onto their shoulders. Okoye met her eyes and saw something there that the others could not see. A shared history, a night on a mountain, a choice made in darkness that had changed both of them. Vance gave him the slightest nod. Then she turned and began the lesson. Outside, the sun continued its climb into a clear Georgia sky. Somewhere far away, in a cemetery full of white stones, a photograph rested against a headstone, its faces no longer crossed out by grief, but illuminated by morning light. The ghosts were at peace, and the woman who had carried them was finally home. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most, or share if you know someone whose service went unseen, whose sacrifice went unspoken. Sometimes the most dangerous warriors are the ones nobody expected.